Dear Zoe, what a privilege to be part of your bat mitzvah this morning, to listen to you read from the Torah, to hear you share your thoughts about your parasha, tying together the story of Sarai and Avram, of Avram's nephew Lot, Kristallnacht, and the thoughtful, generous way in which you contribute to the charities you care about so much. I want to congratulate you on leading the service last night, the enthusiastic way in which you approached your learning, and of course your reading this morning. But I also want to pay tribute to your grandfather, Michael, who has been your patient and attentive and instructive teacher. We have tried to get you onto our team for all our students, Michael, but so far I know you've got a few more grandchildren to go. Over these past 2 weeks, as we've read the story of creation and Adam and Eve, and then the story of Noah and the flood last week, and today the beginning of the story of Abraham and Sarah, I'm reminded that these stories are composed of several different sources: 2 creation stories, 2 flood narratives woven together that don't always agree with each other, and 2 versions of the story that you read, Zoe, in which Avram passes his wife off as his sister. As you so rightly infer, these stories are really told from a male, from Avram's point of view, highlighting Sarai's vulnerability and powerlessness. But rereading this story of Sarai's abduction, I wondered to myself, what were the sources that were omitted in the final redaction of the Torah? What stories were left out because an editor thought perhaps they weren't worthy to be part of the sacred writings? Let me invite you to imagine a long-lost document which the editors of the Torah held once upon a time in their hands. Perhaps it was a variation on your parashah, Zoe, perhaps a song or a poem, or even the fragment of a letter written from inside an Egyptian palace by an Israelite woman, Sarai, taken into captivity by the king's men. And let us imagine that we have a copy of this letter, written on papyrus, a letter from Sarai, smuggled out of the palace to her husband, Avram. What might have been her words? Here's how I imagine her letter to her husband. To my husband Avram, from your sister wife Sarai, I write to you from the confines of the palace of the Egyptian king, where I reside with many other women, Egyptian, Nubian, Ethiopian, Canaanite, and myself, a Hebrew. All of us have been taken captive, and we fear for ourselves and for our loved ones. I often think of the journey you and I have taken so far. When you were already 75 and I was 66, you told me that you had been called by an unknown voice, which you called Adonai, God, to leave our land, our birthplace, and go to a land which this God would show you. You said that God had made a promise to you, that your name would be great, and that through you all the families of the earth would be blessed. I followed you with our household and all the possessions that we had acquired. I asked no questions, because as your wife, it was right that I should be with you. Yet no sooner had we arrived in this land and pitched our tents than a severe famine forced us to move south to Egypt. You told me to tell the Egyptians that I was your sister because you feared for your life if they discovered we were married. In a midrash on my life, on this story, the rabbis elaborate on this part. I know this because I've been told in a dream. Before we arrived at the border to confront the guards there, the rabbis said that you placed me in a casket. I know you wanted to ensure no harm would befall me on account of you, but I felt as though you had put me in a coffin, telling the border guards that there was barley in the casket. Of course, they did not believe you, nor when you told them it was wheat, pepper, gold, precious jewels. When eventually the Egyptians opened the casket, they found me lying there and abducted me into the palace of Pharaoh. I do not know what has become of you since then, whether you are alive or dead. As for me, I have prayed to God day and night, trying to understand why this terrible misfortune has befallen us. Every night I ask God to help me and save me from the hand of this enemy and to show me goodness. Dear husband, today I feared the worst. I was summoned to the king who questioned me about you. I told him, you are my brother. And Avram, he is sending you great riches and is giving you a residence within the precincts of the royal palace. Now I know at least that you are safe. But as for me, he has declared his intention to take me as his wife and is asking his lawyers to write out a marriage contract. I do not know what to do. I am vulnerable at the hands of this powerful man. Avram, I write to you at night to let you know that for the moment I have been spared, for the king and his nobles have been afflicted with a terrible disease. The king is angry, for the plague is on his whole household. Somehow he knows that it is on account of our lives and tricks that he is being punished. I fear for our lives, for the future we hope to have together. Last night I lay down, dispirited, in tears. I slept fitfully, and in the hours of sleep dreamt that I had been given the blessing of a son. Yet, as I embraced the child in my arms, I saw that this was not my child, but that of my Egyptian maidservant, Hagar. In the dream, I told you to take the mother and child into the desert and to abandon them there. When I awoke, I felt a cold hand clutching at my heart. I could not forgive myself for this callous behavior towards Hagar and her child, your child, Avram, for you were this child's father. I dreamed again, Avram, a second dream. Another child is placed in my arms, my own, longed-for, loved son, Isaac, the child who brings me laughter. I rejoice in his birth, me, an old woman of 90. But I am frightened, for I see the figures of Hagar and Ishmael banished and wandering in the desert, and I cannot be at ease with myself. I see that the cruel and indifferent way in which I, dealt with Hagar and Ishmael will reverberate for generations. I guard our son as the apple of my eye. He is innocent and pure. But you, Avram, you no longer look me in the eyes. You are secretive with your God. We are not at peace with each other. I see my life passing before me in my dreams. I see you awaken early, taking Isaac to offer him as a burnt offering on Mount Moriah, arranging the wood and binding him to an altar, reaching out with your knife to slay him. I am silenced by my suffering. I will die, without seeing my son ever again. My heart is forever broken. Was it right, Avram, to deceive the king in the way we did? Was it right to shun an Egyptian slave, a foreigner in our home, and her infant son? You fought with kings and rescued others from captivity. You were hospitable and kind. You even argued with God over the fate of the citizens of Sodom and Gomorrah. But my life, Avram, what is my life as one who showed you devotion and obedience, but could never find my true voice, because there were always other voices occupying the stage, yours, this king, his courtiers, and God's? What will become of humanity in time to come? Can humankind hear the voices of the dead who cry out from the ground? Do they know how to end wars against each other? Do they know how to care for this very earth on which we imprint the destructive soles of our feet, its very fabric torn by the harmful things we do to it? When will the world be exhausted by the violence and hatred people exert against each other? When I die, Avram, tell humanity to choose life. Tell them that the Hagars and Ishmaels of the world are children of God. Tell them that life is precious and to cherish kindness, love, and compassion in their souls. Tell them. Here the letter ends. A letter not only to Sarai's husband, but to you, Zoe, to future generations. A letter that encourages you to cherish your creativity, your skills, your intelligence, your resilience, your sense of humor, and your zingy and zesty sparks for life. A letter that gives voice to our first matriarch, a daughter, wife, mother, aunt, all these roles, but above all, a woman in her own right, as you are, Zoe, with your love of life, your crocheting and knitting and baking, your writing sequels to the Harry Potter books, the tricks and contortions you've learnt through your circus skills, your stoicism, your affection and care for all your family, your little cousins, your great love of Judaism and Jewish life. Perhaps, who knows, one day, when you become a scholar of Jewish studies, you will discover that imagined letter from Sarai to her husband Avram, and teach us that God spoke not only through our patriarchs, but through the women of the Torah, and that perhaps had we listened to their stories, allowed their voices to break through the tumult and noise of the world, our lives and this earth might have moved in a more nurturing, more gentle direction, making our lives and the lives of others a blessing. Amen. Now, I know you're going to come up in a few moments with your dad and mum and Jacob to read the Judy Chicago merger poem, but before I ask them to come with you,